How to decline a proposal without sparking scandal. A Regency lesson in tact, boundaries, and reputation. This story explores timeless lessons about integrity, self-worth, and the courage required to live authentically through the journey of Theodore Ashworth. Readers will discover that true kindness sometimes requires difficult honesty, that protecting others from disappointment often serves primarily to protect ourselves from discomfort, and that the boundaries we maintain with grace protect not only ourselves, but those we might otherwise harm through false promises made from weakness. Above all, this is a story about recognizing that the courage to refuse that is wrong must be eventually be joined by the courage to accept what is right, and that a life lived in truth, though sometimes painful, proves far richer than one constructed upon comfortable deceptions. The morning mist clung to the rose garden at Hartwell Park as Theodora Ashworth knelt among the thorned brush. The morning mist clung to the rose garden at Hartwell Park as Theodora Ashworth knelt among the thorn bushes, her fingers working the soil with practiced care. At 3 and 20, any pretense she had long abandoned any pretense of the delicate femininity society expected. Here is the grey light before the household stirred she could simply exist as herself unburdened by the weight of the expectations and the endless performance of proper womanhood. The earth beneath her fingers was cool and damp, rich with the promise of spring growth. She had been tending these roses since she was old enough to hold a trowel, learning their secrets from the head gardener after her mother's passing, had left the bushes temporarily neglected. Now they flourished under her devoted attention, their blooms more magnificent with each passing season. These roses had been her mother's bride, planted 15 years ago, in the first flush of married happiness late. These roses had been her mother's bride, planted 15 years ago, in the first flush of married happiness. Lady Catherine Ashford had possessed a rare gift of her cultivation, an instinctive understanding of what living things required to thrive. Now there were Thea's inheritance, the only legacy what mattered to her, a living connection to a woman she barely remembered, but deeply missed. Sometimes in the quiet hours of early morning she imagined she could feel her mother's presence among the flowers, a gentle spirit approving of her daughter's careful stewardship. Footsteps crunch on the gravel path behind her. "You will ruin another pair of gloves," Margaret said, settling on the stone bench with her shawl pulled tight against the chill. Her younger sister possessed a practical wisdom that belied her 19 years, observing the world with clear eyes unclouded by romantic illusion. "I have ruined worse things than gloves in pursuit of what matters." Thea did not turn from her work, carefully loosening the soil around a particularly promising bud. Margaret laughed softly, the sound carrying warmth despite the cold morning air. "There is a letter from London. Father has read it 4 times at breakfast, and his spirits have lifted considerably. I believe it concerns Mr. Pembrook." Thea's hands stilled upon the earth. She had met Horace Pembrook twice before. Once once at a house party where he had monopolized her attention for an entire evening, and once at a London assembly where he had requested 3 dances in succession. He possessed a round pleasant face, and an easy manner, the sort of gentleman who told the same 3 jokes at every gathering, and laughed heartily in each retelling his conversation, rarely ventured beyond the superficial, touching upon weather and fashion and the latest society gossip with equal enthusiasm and equal shallowness. He was also heir to £12,000 a year, a fortune that rendered his deficiencies of intellect and imagination largely invisible to a society that valued wealth above character. Father believes him to be a salvation, Thea said quietly, finally setting aside her trowel and brushing soil from her gardening apron. Father believes any wealthy bachelor to be your salvation. Is Mr. Pembrook truly so objection? Father believes any wealthy bachelor to be your salvation. Is Mr. Pembrook truly so objectionable? Thea considered the question with the careful attention she applied to all matters of importance. He is not objectionable at all. That is precisely the difficulty. If he were cruel or foolish, I could refuse him with clear conscience. But he is merely unremarkable, and I cannot determine whether my reluctance stems from wisdom or from impossible standards that no mortal man could hope to meet. The rose She rose and brushed the remaining soil from her gardening apron, looking out across the modest ground of Hartwell Park. The estate remained beautiful, but showing signs of strain to anyone who cared to look carefully. Deferred repairs had left the east wing shuttered against winter damage that remained unaddressed. The staff had thinned from 12 to 7 over the past 3 years. Careful economies were visible in the worn carpets and faded curtains, in the simplified menus and reduced entertainments. The Ashworth fortune, never substantial, had dwindled steadily since her grandfather's unfortunate investments, leaving her father scrambling to maintain appearances, while reality crumbled beneath the elegant facade. Perhaps I am selfish, Thea continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps I should accept whoever will have me and secure our futures. Cecily is 15 and he Cecily is 15 and we will need a proper season. You deserve opportunities I fear we cannot provide. Father grows older and more worried with each passing year. Margaret stood and took her sister's hand with fierce determination. You are the least selfish You are the least selfish person I know. You have sacrificed your own London season so that I might have mine. You have managed his household since you were 17. You have given everything of yourself without complaint or expectation of gratitude. If you married without love, you would teach Cecily and me that our hearts are commodities to be traded for security. I refuse to learn that lesson. They walked together toward the house where Sir Reginald Ashford was indeed reading the letter for a fifth time, his face bright with hope that Thea wished desperately she could share. Their father had aged considerably since their mother's death, his hair gone completely gray and his shoulders stopped beneath burdens both financial and emotional. He loved his daughters with genuine devotion, but viewed their futures through the narrow lens of matrimonial advancement, unable to imagine happiness divorced from material security. Mr. Pembroke arrived at the Hartwell Park on a Tuesday afternoon in late April, his carriage gleaming with fresh lacquer and his manner expansive with self-satisfaction. He was precisely as Thea remembered, pleasant and agreeable, speaking with confidence on subjects he understood only superficially, and carefully avoiding those he did not understand at all. His valet had clearly spent considerable effort upon his appearance, his cravat tied in an elaborate knot that suggested hours of dedicated attention. The first evening, at dinner, he held forth on the merits of his London club, the superior craftsmanship on his new curricle, drawing-rooms, and the proper arrangement of furniture in fashionable drawing-rooms. He dispensed opinions on politics without apparent awareness of their contradictions, and assessed literature he had clearly never read with supreme confidence in his own tastes. Cecily listened with genuine fascination, her young mind still impressed by worldly sophistication, however superficial. Sir Reginald beamed with barely concealed delight, already calculating the financial relief that an advantageous match might provide. Thea smiled politely and felt her spirit slowly compressing into an even smaller space. diminishing with each passing moment, in the presence of a man who saw in her only an ornament to enhance his own consequence. "Miss Ashford," Mr. Pembrook said, turning his full attention upon her with the satisfied expression of a hunter spotting each prey. Spotting easy prey. "I wonder if you might honor me with a walk in the garden tomorrow morning. I find the country air most invigorating after the smoke of London. The physicians recommended fresh air for constitutions weakened weakened by urban living, and I make it my practice to follow their advice scrupulously." Thea paused only a moment before responding, her mind working rapidly to find an acceptable deflection. "I should be delighted, Mr. Pembroke, though I must confess my sister, Cecily is a far more accomplished walking companion than I. She possesses a gift for appreciating natural beauty that I sadly lack. Her, her observations on botany and wildlife would surely enhance your enjoyment of our modest grounds far more than my poor company could manage." Cecily brightened at the Cecily brightened at the unexpected compliment, and before Mr. Pembroke could protest, Thea had arranged for her younger sister to join them, transforming an intimate courtship stroll into a family outing that precluded private conversation. That night Margaret appeared in Thea's bedchamber, with a candle and a knowing expression that suggested she had observed and understood the evening's manoeuvring. "You are managing him quite brilliantly," Margaret observed, settling into the chair beside the dressing-table. "I am not managing him. I am simply ensuring he lacks the opportunity to speak words that would require difficult answers. There is a distinction, however subtle it may appear. Is that not the same thing?" The, Thea sat her, Thea sat her, Thea sat at her dressing-table and began pulling pins from her hair, watching her sister's reflection in the mirror. "I have been attempting to show him gently that we are unsuited. I speak of my contentment with quiet country life, my lack of interest in London society, my devotion to remaining near my family. Yet he seems to hear only what Yet he seems to hear only what he wishes to hear. He interprets my preferences as a feminine modesty requiring only masculine persistence to overcome. Perhaps because no one has ever taught him that a woman might refuse a man of his fortune, he cannot imagine rejection because he has never encountered it. His wealth has shielded him from the ordinary disappointments that teach humility to lesser men. The Thea met her sister's eyes in the mirror, her expression troubled, and therein lies in my predicament. How does one decline what has not yet been offered? And when he does offer, how do I refuse without destroying father's hopes, without injuring our family's standing, without causing more pain than necessary to a man whose only fault is being unremarkable?" Margaret considered this carefully before responding. "I think you cannot prevent pain entirely. You can only choose between pain now, brief and honest, or pain later, prolonged and compounded by years of deception. A quick wound heals cleanly. A festering injury poisons everything it touches. When did you become so wise? I have an excellent teacher." Margaret smiled and rose to leave. "Trust yourself, Thea. You have always known the difference between kindness and cowardice, even when others could not distinguish between them." The following week brought unexpected color. Lord Sebastian Hale, whose estate bordered Hartwell Park to the north, paid a formal visit. He was a tall man of 30 years with dark hair touched by early gray at the temples and eyes that seemed to observe everything while revealing nothing of himself. His manner possessed a quiet gravity, quite unlike Mr. Pembroke's effusive cheerfulness, suggesting depth of thought and feeling that he kept carefully guarded from casual acquaintance. Thea knew the whispers about him, the speculation that had followed him since his return to Hampshire after the scandal. 5 years past he had been engaged to a celebrated London beauty, Miss Arabella Thornton, whose accomplishments and connections had made her the prize of 3 consecutive seasons. Their engagement had been announced with great fanfare, and society had proclaimed them the perfect match, and then quite suddenly he had not been engaged at all. The precise circumstances remained mysterious despite countless attempts at investigation, and society had never quite forgiven him for the scandal, however muted it had become with passing years. She found herself seated beside him at a tea while Mr. Pembrook expounded upon the superiority of his tailor and difficulty of finding proper boot leather in the provinces. Lord Hale listened with an expression of carefully maintained neutrality that might have been politeness or might have been subtle mockery. "You appear, Lord Hale," said in a voice meant only for her, "as though you are enduring a theatrical performance rather than enjoying pleasant conversation." Thea glanced at him, with surprise at his directness, unaccustomed to such frank observation from a virtual stranger. "I confess I find myself in the position more than I would prefer. Society seems to require endless performance with a very little substance beneath the spectacle. I have noticed that Mr. Pembrook is most attentive to you. His interest is evident to anyone who cares to observe. Society would say I thought I ought to be grateful for such attention from a man of his prospects. His fortune and connections would be considered great advantages for a woman in my position. And what would you say?" She weighed her response, with care, uncertain how much honesty this peculiar gentleman could tolerate. "I would say that attention is simple to bestow. True misunderstanding requires considerably more effort. Mr. Pembrook sees what he expects to see rather than to see rather than what to see rather than what actually exists before him." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition passing between them as though he had discovered an unexpected ally. "I have observed, Miss Ashworth, that protecting others from disappointment often serves primarily to protect ourselves from discomfort. The kindest primarily to the kindest truths remain truth none the less, however difficult their delivery might prove." Before Thea could formulate a reply, Mr. Pembroke materialized at her side, claiming her attention for a turn upon the terrace with a propriety insistence. She accompanied him with a practised grace, but Lord Hale's observation lodged itself firmly in her thoughts and refused to depart. She had been unfailingly kind to Mr. Pembroke. She had not been truthful. These were not, she was beginning to comprehend, the same thing at all. Her gentle deflections and careful manoeuvring had prevented immediate discomfort while allowing false hopes to flourish unchecked. Perhaps genuine kindness required the courage to cause temporary pain in service of greater truth. The proposal arrived 3 weeks later at a garden party held at Blackwood Hall. Paper lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, and musicians played softly upon the terrace as Mr. Pembroke guided Thea toward the secluded clove with barely suppressed anticipation. His face shone with the confidence, and he had clearly rehearsed his speech with considerable care, adjusting his cravat and clearing his throat with theatrical solemnity. "Miss Ashford," he began with a cadence of carefully memorized remarks, "from the moment I first beheld you, I recognized a woman of exceptional quality. Your beauty, your accomplishments, your natural grace speak eloquently to your suitability as wife to a man of standing. I flatter myself that we are admirably matched to temperament and situation, and therefore I request the honor of your hand in marriage. I am convinced we shall deal extremely well together, and that our union will prove advantageous to all concerned." Thea listened and felt the immense weight of what she was about to do. She thought of her father's desperate hopes, of her sister's narrowing prospects, of the comfortable future she was about to refuse. Then she thought of the decades stretching ahead, years of performance and pretense of slowly disappearing into a life that did not fit of becoming a stranger to herself in service of security she had not chosen. Mr. Pembroke, she said with a steadiness she did not entirely feel, I am deeply sensible of the honor you do me, and I recognize the sincerity of your sentiments. You have shown me nothing but courtesy, and I hold you a genuine esteem as an honorable gentleman. She watched hope kindle in his eyes, saw him preparing to accept what he assumed was imminent surrender, and forced herself to continue before her courage failed. It is precisely because I respect you that I must speak with complete honesty, though I know my words will cause you pain. I cannot accept your proposal, not because of I not because of any failing in your character, for you an honorable man, for you are an honorable gentleman, who will make some fortunate woman an excellent husband. But I do not possess the depth of feeling that marriage requires. My heart remains unmoved despite your many attentions. To accept you would be to deceive you, and you deserve a wife whose heart belongs entirely to you rather than one who offers mere respect, where love should reside. Mr. Pembroke stared at her as this expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and the first stirrings of wounded pride. His prepared speech has not included provisions for refusal, and he struggled visibly to comprehend what was occurring. Surely you are overwhelmed by the significance of the moment, he said after a lengthy pause. I am confident your feelings will deepen with time and familiarity. Many successful marriages have been founded upon less promising beginnings than ours. Your hesitation does credit as evidence of proper feminine delicacy. I will not alter my decisions, Mr. Pembroke. To suggest otherwise would offer false hope that would be far crueler than the honest answer I have given. I have considered my feelings with great care over these past weeks. They will not change regardless of how much time passes, of how persistent your courtship proves. I see. His voice had gone flat and cold warmth, replaced by injured dignity. I have made a fool of myself pursuing a woman who had never intended to accept me. I wonder that you allowed my attentions to continue so long if your answer was always to be refusal. I did not intend to deceive you, and I apologize if my attempts at gentle discouragement prove insufficient. You have behaved as an honorable gentleman making a sincere offer. There is no foolishness in honest vulnerability. I ask only that you accept my refusal, not as a judgment upon your worth, but simply an acknowledgment that we would not suit, that our temperaments and desires are too different to permit happy union. She returned to the party alone, composed her features into pleasant neutrality, and endured the remaining hours with a smile that felt like a mask carved from stone. Mr. Pembroke departed early with thin excuses about urgent business elsewhere, and whispered speculation began before his courage had cleared the drive. The following morning brought the anticipated confrontation. Sir Reginald paced his study in agitation, while Thea stood before him like a prisoner awaiting sentence. His face had gone quite pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he struggled to comprehend what his daughter had done. You have discarded the security of this entire family, her father said with more bewilderment than anger in his voice. Your sister's futures, are standing in society, everything I have struggled to preserve since your mother's death. 12,000 a year. Theodora, do you comprehend what the sun represents? Do you understand what we stand to lose through your stubbornness? Father, I love you and I love our family with all my heart, but I cannot purchase safety by spending a lifetime pretending emotions I do not possess. That would not be marriage. It would be a commercial transaction, dressed in wedding clothes. I will not construct an entire life upon deception simply because the alternative proves inconvenient. Sir Reginald lowered himself into his chair with sudden weariness, his anger deflating in something closer to grief. Your mother would have found the proper words to make you understand. I confess I cannot. I see only the practical consequences, the opportunities squandered, the difficulties that lie ahead. Mother married for love rather than advantage. She chose you when wealthier suitors presented themselves, when her family urged her toward matches that would have provided greater security. Can you truly expect less of me than the, can you truly expect less of me than she demanded for herself? Would she have wished me to accept a man I could never love simply because his fortune exceeded yours? He had no response, and Thea left him to wrestle with his disappointment alone, understanding that some wounds required time rather than an argument to heal. The weeks that followed tested every reserve of patience. Thea possessed Mrs. Pembrook, descended upon Hampshire like an avenging force, a formidable woman who viewed Thea's refusal as a personal affront, requiring immediate correction. She was a widow of considerable social influence, accustomed to arranging matters to her satisfaction, and accustomed to opposition from those who considered her inferiors. "I desire only the benefits you, my dear," Mrs. Pembroke said during an interminable morning call, false concern dripping from every syllable like honey concealing poison. "A young woman in your position cannot afford excessive selectivity. The Ashford fortune is not what it once was. I understand declining a gentleman of Horace's standing and fortune well. Such tales do circulate, people talk, you know. They speculate about the reasons behind such surprising decisions." Thea placed her teacup upon its saucer with deliberate precision, refusing to be baited into defensive explanation. "Mrs. Pembroke, I appreciate your solicitude. Mrs. Pembroke, I appreciate your solicitude regarding my welfare, though I remain quite capable of discerning on my own best interests. Your son is an estimable gentleman, who deserves a wife capable of genuine devotion. I am not the woman regardless of how fervently anyone might wish otherwise. No amount of persuasion will alter this fundamental truth." When Mr. Pembroke returned to press his suit a second time, convinced by his mother that feminine reluctance required only masculine persistence to overcome, Thea found herself compelled toward greater directness than she had wished to employ. "Mr. Pembroke, I have already provided my answer. I shall not provide it again. You must accept my decision as final and govern yourself accordingly. Continued pursuit of this matter demonstrates disrespect toward us both and diminishes the dignity that should characterize our future interactions." He departed in cold fury, and Thea understood she had created an enemy where none had existed before, transforming rejected suitor into a determined adversary. The scandal developed not through dramatic confrontation, but through the gradual poison of whispered conversations passed from drawing room to drawing room across the county. Mrs. Pembroke distributed her version of events to every willing ear, embellishing and distorting until truth became unrecognizable. Thea had deliberately entrapped her son, encouraging his attentions while secretly planning rejection. Thea was a calculating adventuress, hoping to secure better offers through the notoriety of refusing an excellent match. The Ashworths harbored social ambitions far exceeding their station, and deserved the censure of respectable society. Invitations grew scarce, then scarer still. Cecily's promising suitor, a younger clergyman of modest fortune but genuine character, discovered pressing business elsewhere, and ceased his visits entirely. Sir Reginald found himself excluded from gatherings where he had once been warmly welcomed. His attempts at conversation met with cool civility rather than genuine friendship. Perhaps I could Perhaps I should have simply accepted him, Thea confessed to Margaret, one evening when his composure finally fractured and tears escaped her careful control. "My happiness seems a small thing weighed against the suffering of everyone I love. Father looks 10 years older than he did 6 months ago. Cecily cries herself asleep. Even the servants whisper about our disgrace." Margaret grasped her hands with fierce intensity, her eyes blazing with conviction. "If you had accepted him, you would have demonstrated that our desires carry no weight, that women exist merely to be bartered for advantage like livestock at market. You have proven we possess the right to choose, even when choosing extracts a terrible price. I would rather face society's censure standing beside a sister of conviction than enjoy popularity purchased through your misery." Lord Hale began appearing at those gatherings from which the Ashworth had not been yet excluded. his presence a silent rebuke to those who shunned him. He offered no dramatic defense of Thea's character, for that would have drawn unwanted attention and fueled additional speculation. Instead, he simply sought for her conversation with consistent interest, demonstrating through his continued association that she remained deserving of respect regardless of what tales circulated about her. I understand you possess some personal familiarity with the scandal, Thea said to him during a walk through the frost-touched gardens of neighboring estate where autumn had begun stripping color from the landscape. I do indeed. I dissolved an engagement 5 years ago under circumstances that generated a considerable discussion and earned me the lasting disapproval of many whose good opinion I had previously enjoyed. The celebrated Miss Thornton, Thea spoke the name carefully, uncertain whether the subject pained him. Just so. Lord Hale walked in silence for a moment, his breath forming clouds in the cold air as he gathered his thoughts. She was beautiful and accomplished, and universally admired. Everyone assured me I had achieved the most advantageous match in England, and congratulated me upon my extraordinary good fortune. Yet she wished the Yet she wished to marry the man she believed I might become rather than the man I actually was. She had constructed an elaborate fantasy of our future together, a fantasy that required me to transform into someone entirely different from myself. I realized I would exhaust my remaining years of apologizing for failure to transform into her imaginary ideal. What followed when you ended the engagement? Condemnation, naturally. Many considered me cruel, and perhaps with justification. Miss Thornton was genuinely devastated, and her suffering was real regardless of whether our match would have proved happy. But the greater cruelty would have been imprisoning us both in a marriage founded upon the expectation that I would become someone entirely different. I chose immediate pain over prolonged mutual destruction. Time has proven the wisdom and of the choice, though the cost was considerable. Thea absorbed his words thoughtfully, finding expected comfort in shared experiences. You harbor no regrets? I regret causing pain. I do not regret speaking truth. These are distinct considerations that society often confuses. We are taught that causing pain is always wrong, but sometimes pain proves necessary for healing. A physician who refuses to set broken bone for fear of causing discomfort serves his patient poorly. The climactic confrontation materialized at the spring assembly, the largest social gathering of the Hampshire season. Mr. Pembrook, absent from the county for several months following his second rejection, returned with apparent determination to salvage his wounded pride through public humiliation of the woman who had refused him. He approached Thea before the assembled company with his complexions, flushed and his manner aggressive, clearly fortified by liquid courage and maternal encouragement. Miss Ashford, I am astonished you dare present yourself in respectable society, given how shamefully you treated my honest affection and sincere devotion. A woman of honor would have accepted a gentleman's proposal, with proper gratitude, rather than subjecting him to repeated humiliation. The musicians fell silent. Conversation ceased throughout the room, every eye turned toward Thea, as she felt the full weight of this public challenge pressing upon her. The moment seemed to stretch endlessly as she gathered her composure and prepared her response. Mr. Pembroke, she replied in a voice calm and clear enough to reach every corner of the assembly room, I am genuinely sorry that you remain in pain. I never wish to cause you suffering and take no satisfaction in your distress. However, I cannot apologize for speaking honestly, nor will I claim feelings I never possessed simply to preserve your dignity and to satisfy your wounded pride. I owed you truth rather than love. I provided the truth even when doing so proved difficult. I stand my choice entirely and would make the same decision again without hesitation. Lord Hale proved to stand at her side. His presence a wordless declaration of support that carried considerable weight given his own standing in county society. Other guests began shifting, their expressions revealing sympathies that Mr. Pembroke had clearly failed to anticipate. The whispered tide that had run against Thea for a month seemed suddenly to reverse direction as observers recognized the difference between a woman speaking truth and a man seeking petty revenge. Mr. Pembroke surveyed in the room of allies and finding none withdrew in obvious defeat, his mother's careful campaign of destruction undone in a single moment of honest confrontation. The tide of opinion had finally turned. Summer arrived at Hartwell Park carrying with it a new and gentle equilibrium. The family had weathered the storm and discovered in its aftermath which friendship possessed genuine foundation and which had been merely ornamental designed to impress rather than to comfort. Sir Reginald sought his eldest daughter in the garden one soft evening as fireflies began their dance among the roses, and offered halting words of apology that had clearly cost him considerable effort to formulate. Allowed fear of poverty to obscure what truly matters. He admitted with difficulty, his voice rough with emotion, "Your happiness, your right to determine your own future. Your mother would have been deeply ashamed of my behavior. I am ashamed of myself for pressuring you toward a match that would have brought you misery, however glided that misery might have appeared." Thea embraced him without hesitation, feeling years of tension dissolve between them. "You acted from love and fear combined. I understand that even when I could not accept it, you wanted to protect us best you knew how." Lord Hale's visits to Hartwell increased in frequency as spring gave to summer, his carriage appearing on their drive with comfortable regularity. Their conversations wandered across literature and philosophy, and estate management and the proper cultivation of roses, touching upon subjects both profound and trivial with equal engagement. He neither flattered nor performed the elaborate courtship rituals society prescribed him. He simply engaged with her as an equal, a companion, a friend, whose presence had become essential to her happiness in ways she had not initially recognized. When his proposal finally came, they stood together in her mother's rose garden as late afternoon sunlight turned the blooms to gold and cast long shadows across the carefully tended beds. "Miss Ashford," he began with none of the rehearsed formality that had characterized Mr. Pembrook's declaration. I have admired you since our first real conversation at the interminable tea party. Not your beauty, though you possess it in abundance, but your courage and conviction and absolute refusal to diminish yourself for the comfort of others. I do not ask you to transform into some imaginary ideal. I do not require performance of wifely perfection of sacrifice, of the qualities that make you remarkable. I ask only whether you might consider constructing a life alongside me while remaining precisely and entirely yourself." He paused, and she glimpsed something rare in his expression, a vulnerability he permitted few to witness, an openness that revealed the depth of feeling beneath his customary reserve. "If your heart inclines elsewhere, I will accept your answer, with complete grace and genuine wishes for your happiness. I offer not demand but the possibility. I offer partnership rather than ownership. I offer love that seeks your flourishing rather than your diminishment." Thea did not respond immediately, mindful of the weight such decision carried. May I request time for consideration, not because I doubt your sincerity, but because I wish to examine my own heart with the care such an important question deserves. "Take whatever time you require. I will wait as long as necessary. True love proves itself through patience." She spent a fortnight examining her own heart with the same rigorous attention she had once applied to understanding her reluctance toward Mr. Pembrook. She walked through the gardens where her mother's roses bloomed and asked herself difficult questions without flinching from difficult answers. What she discovered astounded her with its clarity. Her feelings for Lord Hale before no resemblance to the hollow courtesy she had felt for her rejected suitor. This was something altogether different. Intellectual kinship and made conversation a pleasure rather than a duty. Genuine respect founded upon observed character rather than reported fortune. A warmth that had grown so gradually she had failed to recognize in transformation into love until it had become essential to her happiness. "I accept you," she told him in the rose garden where she had so often sought solace, speaking with the same directness he had always appreciated, not from obligation, not because society expects it, but because I have discovered in you a true partner for both my mind and my heart. I learned that refusing what is wrong constitutes only half the necessary wisdom. The remainder lies in recognizing what is right and finding courage sufficient to embrace it fully. Their wedding took place in a small chapel at Hartwell Park on a morning of spectacular September sunshine that seemed to bless their union with golden light. Only genuine friends filled the pews, their numbers smaller in fashion, required but larger than Thea had feared during their darkest days of the scandal. Cecily wept with uncomplicated with throughout the ceremony. Margaret smiled with a satisfaction of prophecy fulfilled, having seen what would unfold long before her sister recognized it. Sir Reginald escorted his elder daughter down the aisle with tears upon his weathered cheeks, and peace restored to his troubled heart, finally understanding that his daughter's happiness mattered more than any fortune. A year passed, and then another, bringing with them a quiet contentment of genuine partnerships. Thea stood one morning in the rose garden of Ashwood Manor, tending bushes transplanted from her mother's original collection at Hartwell Park. The familiar mist of early morning clung to the blossoms as it had on countless similar mornings throughout her life. Yet everything had changed. She was Lady Hale now, mistress of an estate far grander than her childhood home, beloved by a husband who celebrated rather than diminished her spirit. Lord Hale found her there as she had known he would, his presence as natural and necessary as the sunrise that was beginning to burn away the morning fog. Deep contemplation this morning? He inquired, settling onto the stone bench where he could watch her work among the flowers. I am thinking of everything I have learned through these trials, that declining what is wrong requires courage rather than cruelty. The honestly offered with compassion serves better than comfortable deception. The boundaries maintained with grace protect not only ourselves but those we might otherwise harm through false promises made from weaknesses. She turned to face him fully, her hands still bearing traces of garden soil. I have learned that reputation, though easily damaged, proves less fragile than integrity would have been had I sacrificed it for mere acceptance. That genuine partnership emerges through thoughtful selection, through knowing one's own heart clearly enough to recognize its true match when it finally appears. What else? She smiled and took his hand in hers, unconcerned about the soil she transferred to his skin. That the courage to refuse must eventually be joined by courage to accept when acceptance proves authentic. That we honor those who love us not by protecting them from all discomfort, but by trusting them to bear truth with dignity. That the genuine scandal is never a declined proposal, never the refusal of what would diminish us. She gazed across the garden at roses blooming in glorious profusion, at the life she had chosen rather than the passively accepted as the future stretching before her full of promise and purpose. The genuine scandal, she said quietly, is a life refused, a heartfelt unclaimed, a truth left forever unspoken that is only scandal I intend never to commit. They walked together through the lifting mist, equals in spirit, and affection and mutual respect, toward the future they had crafted through honesty and courage, and the simple, revolutionary act of telling the truth. Behind them the roses continued their patient blooming, leaving testament to what flourishes when tended with genuine care rather than mere obligation, when loved for what it truly is rather than what others might wish it to become.